The Nick Scott Effect. The Nick Scott Effect. Available everywhere podcasts are found.
What might happen, but
I think 5 cats.
Yes, we have 5 cats. We are foster failures. We work with feral cats to rescue them, and you bring them in and calm them down to adopt them out, and we can't do it. So we're foster failures.
That's awesome. Well, as we record remotely here, you may see the frames in my video and yours drop out. That's completely normal. Don't worry about it because, again, it's recording our stuff. And we're rolling right now. I can edit all this. I'm a huge fan, and I'm so honored you took the time to come on and talk with me. I'm from the Cincinnati area, but I live in Charleston, West Virginia. And, of course, you can't come to West Virginia without hearing the name Homer Hickam. You, I think, wear and represent the state well. And the locals, of course, they love you. Are you still in West Virginia?
No, actually, I live in Huntsville, Alabama most of the time.
Okay.
And we have a home also down in St. John, the Virgin Islands, for like the last 20 years, not counting when it got blown away by Hurricane Irma and Maria. So I spent the last few years rebuilding that. But I get up to West Virginia quite often. My brother lives in Roanoke, and I like to go up and see him and then sneak on over to Beckley and that area where for many years we had the Rocket Boys Festival, and now Theater West Virginia annually puts on Rocket Boys the musical. So I like to go up for that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, to come right off of Rocket Boys, I have something to show you. And before we went on air, my wife wanted to say hi. My wife is a huge fan of yours, and she's upstairs painting, and she threatened me within an inch of my life to put her on camera. So she won't be in our recording here. But I have here a copy of your book, October Sky. Now, here's what's special about this. So my wife, when she was a little girl, you were doing a book signing, and I want to say it was around the time the movie was released. The movie was released, what, mid-'90s, early 90s?
Yeah, it was actually released in 1999. It was made in 1998.
Okay.
That book that you've got there is the mass market movie tie-in, so they've changed the name. The real name of the book is Rocket Boys, of course.
Sure.
But they changed the name for the movie, and then so Random House came out with the mass market called October Sky, and that one broke all kinds of records in the sales department and so on. So yeah, it's and I like the poster that goes along with it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
It's nice. So yeah.
So okay, so it's probably around 2000. So she was probably 16 or 17. But you were in the Charleston area doing a book signing, and I don't know if you can see this, but you wrote that to my wife when she was probably freshman, sophomore, junior in high school, and she has kept this book as like a prized possession all of this time.
Oh my gosh, to Nellie, a rocket girl. And
Kelly, yep.
I see that, Kelly, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly, a rocket girl. And I see that Roy Lee Cook has signed it. Quentin signed it. Oh, wow, it's a real collector's item there.
Yeah. So when Burke, our friend Burke, lined this up, and I'm so grateful he did for me to talk to you, my wife, literally, her eyes were like, and she ran to our safe. We have a safe with valuables in it. And this is, just so you know, this is in a safe, in a weather, temperaturized safe. And she keeps, so I wanted to show you that.
Well, thank you. And yeah, my wife does the same thing. I'm always signing copies of Rocket Boys or one of the books, first editions. She goes out and collects first edition Homer Hickam books and puts them out on the kitchen counter for me to sign, and then they disappear. I don't know exactly where they go, but I think you will know when I pass away, because eBay is going to suddenly light up with autographed first edition Homer Hickam books.
I was about to say, Have you checked your checking account recently? Is there any big spikes?
So I don't even ask. I just let it happen. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's her little cottage industry, so that's good. That's fine.
Being married, I understand what that's like. You just let it happen.
Just let it happen. That's fine, honey. Whatever. I'll sign it. There you go.
So take me back to, and I've seen the movie, of course. I think we all have. And take me back to when you were a boy. And you've probably told this story a million times. What drew you into rockets and propulsion? What do you remember as a kid, like where that spark came from?
Yeah, well, of course, it's famously documented in the book and the movie.
I have to ask.
I know you do, and I'm going to answer. But I would just take you back to that era. It's the late 1950s. I've lived my entire life. I was born in 1943, February 19th. I'll be 80 in a not too distant future here.
Oh, happy early birthday.
Well, thank you. It's good. It's good to have made it this far, I have to tell you. But so I'm living born and raised in Colwood, West Virginia, in the mountains, McDowell County, in the coal fields. And my dad is a foreman at the coal mine. In the earlier years, he worked for a wonderful, magnificent Stanford University graduate engineer by the name of Captain William Laird, and who saw something in this boy, Homer Hickam Sr., and brought him up and taught him everything about coal mining. And so in around 1955, the captain retired, and my dad took over as superintendent of the coal mine. So Colwood was a very busy industrial town at that time, about 2,000 people. The coal company owned every house, every street, every tree, every road, every fence. They owned every store. They owned they owned every man who lived in a town. In order to live in a town, you had to live in a company house, and they only rented it to the houses to men who worked at the mine. And then that meant all the women were married to coal miners as well. So we were in this rather interesting but very controlled coal town, company town. And it's all that I knew. But growing up, I had wonderful teachers, and I was the second son. The first one was the perfect son by the name of Jim, who my dad absolutely adored, doted on him, and I came along as rather a surprise. In later years, when I learned how long it actually took to have a baby, I counted back. I counted 9 months from my brother's first birthday. That was precisely the day that I was born. So they really celebrated on that first birthday.
They did.
My parents
big celebration.
It was a big celebration. So, and I think it was a great surprise that I came along. And they were sure that I was going to be a girl. And my mom had looked through all the books and asked all the women and to decide what they were going to name this baby boy or baby girl. Mm-hmm. And they had determined after all of this study and discernment and wondering and questioning and asking to name her Susie.
You don't look like a Susie to me, Homer.
I was going to be Susie Hickam. That's who I was going to be. The perfect daughter after a perfect son. But along I came, which astonished everybody. And so my mom just got to the hospital before a big snowstorm hit. So it was several days before my dad came over. And apparently I was a pretty scrawny, weak baby. They weren't sure I was going to live. And my dad walked into the hospital room and said, and took one look, and Mom was holding me and said, "Elsie, that's got to be the ugliest baby I've ever seen in my life." And turned around and walked out. And the next person in the room was the nurse with the clipboard. She said, "Mrs. Hickam, have you decided what you're going to name this baby boy?" And she said, "Why, yes, I've decided to name this one after his father." And so I became Homer Hickam Jr. But they called me Sonny growing up. So I was very nearsighted. I was very small. But apparently I was smart enough that or noisy enough that they had a rule there at the Colwood School that if you could tie your shoes and go to the bathroom by yourself, you were allowed to go to school. So as soon as I mastered both of those, Mom kicked me out of the house. So I was more than a year younger than almost everybody in my class. So that
Oh, wow.
that meant I started kind of behind everybody in terms of physical development. You wonder why I didn't get the girls as they showed. They were older than me, but anyway. So I'm getting around to answering your question.
No, take your time.
So I was a fair student. I loved reading. I loved writing. I had my own little newspaper. Growing up, Roy Lee Cook, who later became one of the Rockets boys, was my ace reporter. And we actually hand printed this newspaper, which meant we weren't a volume business, But anyway, I was very interested in writing, but I wrote an article about this lady who fell down in a creek after she chased a snake into the creek, and it was really funny the way I wrote it. And that lady was my mom. So she took away my First Amendment rights for many, many years. So there I was. Trying to figure out who I was and what I was. And so off I go to high school. And I'm really still I'm not interested particularly in science, or I wasn't good at it, or math. I just wasn't good. Wasn't that interested in it. But I had read so many novels and adventure stories and everything growing up. So there I am, in the 10th grade, going to Big Creek High School, which is 2 mountains away from Colwood. That's the way we measured everything in McDowell County.
2 mountains.
Miles means nothing. It's the number of mountains between you and wherever you're going. So 2 mountains away was Big Creek High School. And I have the Colwood kids, and now that I've known for all these years, first through 9th grade. So now in the 10th grade, we're at this consolidated high school, Big Creek. So we're seeing all these other kids coming from all over McDowell County, or from that part of McDowell County, and they're different from us Colwood kids in a lot of different ways. I think our teachers were certainly a little bit more interested, and not that they weren't in the other schools, but in Colwood it was such a closed town, and the teachers were paid a little bit extra to come there. So
sure.
And we were had coalesced into this tight little group. So we get over there, and now we're seeing kids coming from all over the place, and so all of a sudden our horizons are open just a little bit. Sure. But it was only in October, so I'd only been at Big Creek for a couple of months when the Russians launched the world's first Earth satellite, which was called Sputnik, and everything just went nuts about it. I'd read a lot of science fiction growing up, Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and so on. So to me, the idea of a satellite was something that I'd heard of, but I never imagined that it would happen during my life. I figured, 100 years from now, somebody going into space would be 1,000 years from now. So this just excited my imagination so much that when it was announced in the Bluefield Telegraph, I was actually had been the delivery boy for years. I wasn't able to do it when I went to Big Creek because I had to get up and go to school too early to catch the bus. But I had delivered the Bluefield Telegraph for years and years. So in that paper, and then also the Welch Daily News, which was also the afternoon paper, they announced that Sputnik, this thing that everybody was talking about, and the United States was so scared about and wanted to react to, they announced that Sputnik was going to fly over Colwood. And I saw that, and I told my mom I was going to go out in the backyard and watch this amazing thing. Couldn't imagine it was actually going to fly, because you got to realize everything happened in the world elsewhere, and Colwood was like its own its own world. Yeah. So everything else, you didn't even think about anything ever happening in Colwood. But here's the thing that everybody's talking about in the whole world is actually going to fly over Colwood. So I wanted to go see it, and I had no idea what I would be seeing. But if they said it was going to fly over, then I guess it would be something that I could see, because people
Sure.
were seeing it. There were pictures in the paper and everything. People were seeing this thing.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by the Appalachian Outpost. So right now, the big thing in Appalachia is trail riding. We have the Hatfield-McCoy Trail System right here in West Virginia. And the Appalachian Outpost caters to trail riders. They have dozens and dozens of cabins on site that feel just like home. I love staying in them. They have the Broken Axle Bar and Grill on site. So if you want to grab a drink with your friends when you come off the trail, grab some good food, you could do that as well. And everything you need is right there to bring your RZR, your side-by-side, your rock crawling Jeep, your four-wheeler, whatever the case may be that you're hitting the trails with. It's at the Appalachian Outpost. They have a trailhead to the Hatfield-McCoy Trail System right there off-site. So your next off-road trail riding excursion starts at the AppalachianOutpost.com. That's AppalachianOutpost.com. Head there now. You can see how all their amenities. You can even reserve your cabin rental right there on their website at AppalachianOutpost.com.
And also, there wasn't a lot of light pollution or anything like that. So actually, our night sky was pretty deep, dark black.
Sure. Yeah.
With the stars that come out, you could actually see the edge of the Milky Way in Coalwood.
Oh wow,
it's hard,
that would have been incredible.
Difficult to see much of a night sky anywhere in the United States anymore, but at that time you could. So, so my mom was intrigued that I wanted to see this. So she told the neighbor lady that Sonny was going to watch Sputnik in the backyard that night. And so the neighbor lady, I guess, thought that was interesting, and so she went to the next neighbor lady, and so on. That's the way that news was communicated.
Right.
We often wondered, why did we not ever, as kids, ever get away with anything in Coalwood? Is because that backyard fence telegraph was a lot quicker than we were on our bikes. so anyway, so it got transmitted all down through Coalwood that Sonny Hickam was going to go out in the backyard and watch Sputnik, and the message apparently got a little bit muddled in that it ultimately became that the only place that you could see Sputnik was from the Hickam.
Your backyard.
So that night, as it was getting dark and the time was approaching where they said Sputnik was going to fly over, my dad walked out on the back porch. My mom was standing there. I was out in the yard, and there was a whole bunch of people collected around, and he said, "Elsie, why are all these people in our backyard?" And she said, "They've come to help Sonny watch Sputnik." And he said, "Well, they can all just go home, because I can't believe that President Eisenhower would ever allow anything Russian to fly over Coalwood." So he was headed up to the coal mine. He didn't even look up. But
which is kind of funny in the news that's happening as we're recording this, with the Chinese spy balloon coming over.
That's true, and it's a good thing they didn't fly over Coalwood back in the late 1950s, because by God, we would have shot them down. But anyway, so
I can see that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, President Eisenhower was not in charge of the laws of physics, so Sputnik did arrive right on time, and the way it happened to fly was the way our mountains were oriented. I mean, if it had flown just laterally across them, it would have been in an instant, wouldn't have seen it, but it actually split the sky, went down between these two big mountains that formed the valley that Coalwood is set in. So I had quite some time to look at it, and I would not have been more impressed by that for some reason. That if it had been God in a golden chariot flying over, I would not have been more impressed by that. And I knew at that moment, it was like this huge adventure, this huge opportunity just kind of opened up to me. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I just felt like that something was opening up for the whole world, and I wanted to be part of that.
Sure.
And so the only way that I could figure out to be part of it was to learn how to build rockets. There in Little Coalwood, West Virginia. Build rocket. And so I told the next night at the kitchen table, I said, I'm going to build a rocket. And my dad didn't say anything. My brother thought it was that sounded like something his idiot younger brother would do, and he just laughed. But my mom took a long look at me, and she said, "Well, don't blow yourself up." And
That is very good advice.
To get going.
That's very wise advice. And on the back of the book here, it says you used like scrap metals that you would find. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, when you're in an industrial town like Coalwood, it's not hard to find scrap metal, okay?
Sure.
The mine used a lot of different types of tubing. They were always, the Coalwood mine was at 800 feet, and it was beneath all kinds of water. So it was constantly having to be pumped out, and they used all kinds of different types of tubing and pipes and so on to do that. And so a quick perusal of all the tubing behind the machine shop.
Pretty easy.
It's like, okay, so let's see, do I want aluminum tubing, copper tubing, or my goodness, does that look like steel tube? I want that. That's it. That's what I want. So
since let me start here. At what point through your career in the different stages of your life did you decide I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write my story, my life in a book? Right.
Well, I wrote for the college newspaper at Virginia Tech. So I was a column writer there and pretty successful and kind of famous on campus for writing this this column. But then after Virginia Tech, it was in the mid-'60s, and Vietnam was going on. I ended up in Vietnam. And so my life got occupied for about 6 years getting ready.
Homer, I did not know that, sir. I'm so sorry. Thank you for your service to our country, sir. I did not know that.
I was a lieutenant in the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam. So
wow.
So and that was
that's incredible. I had no idea. That's amazing.
Well, that's why I'm with you, Nick, to explain these things to you. 1967, 68. So when I came back from Vietnam, I'm still in the Army, but I just felt like that I was missing something in life, and I decided that it was writing. I wanted to write. And I had an engineering degree from Virginia Tech at that time. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I'd long since given up any hope of ever working for NASA or anything like that. Apollo program was winding down at that point. We were still flying, but they were basically laying off engineers, so if I was interested in that. But actually, my life had been pretty well sidetracked by Vietnam. I was actually recovering from some wounds in Fort Lewis, Washington, when Neil Armstrong landed Apollo 11. I watched it from a hospital ward. So, so it was like a dream that had long since passed me, but I still had this idea of maybe being a writer. So I started. I was also just trying to find some other passion in my life, and like I had during that Rocket Boys era. Mm-hmm. And so I started to scuba dive. I really fell in love with diving and became ultimately a scuba instructor, and started freelance writing for a number of different scuba magazines, Skin Diver Magazine, Sport Diver, Diving USA. So I started cutting my teeth trying to figure out how to write. And along the way, I happened upon this story that off the coast of North Carolina, near Morehead City, North Carolina, a German U-boat had been found. They thought it was. And so I got Sport Diver Magazine to pay my way, and I went up there to North Carolina and ultimately ended up diving on what I did recognize as a German U-boat, and it was a U-352, which was the second German U-boat sunk in American waters during World War II. And so I started writing about that and doing all kinds of diving up there and all the wrecks and so on. And over a period of time, I gradually began to understand that I was collecting stories and information on a big battle during World War II that was virtually not recorded anywhere.
Yeah.
And so so I started with the idea of writing a book about the German U-boat wars up and down the East Coast during World War II. That ultimately became my first book. It came out, by then, when it came out in 1989, I had done other things, and I had managed to get a job with NASA, but I still had this desire to to write. And so actually there was another fellow who read some of my articles about the U-boats before my first book came out. Torpedo Junction was the name of the book. And he was an insurance adjuster up in Maryland, and he kept writing me and calling me and asking me about submarines. And I finally had to kind of blow him off and say, you know what, all I know is about German submarines, and I understand you want to write about nuclear submarines, so I'm glad that my research has helped you. I'd love to talk to you about this, and good luck on your book. I never expected him to get published. His name, by the way, was Tom Clancy.
No.
So,
wow. So me growing up, I was born in '82. I know I'm a young pup compared to you, but in my college years and high school years, I like video games like most folks my age growing up in those years. So Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, Tom Clancy's what's the other one? Ghost Recon. All those games, and then he had all the amazing films. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Tom Clancy. That's incredible.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy, really. And he did get his first book, The Hunt for Red October, was published by the U.S. Naval Institute Press. Yeah. And so when it came out, now it was my turn to write this insurance broker and call him and say, did you like that publisher? Were they good for you? And he said yes. And by the way, he sent me a signed copy of first edition of Red October. Thanks for your help.
Wow.
Yeah, that's something else will end up on eBay. So anyway, so after I'd finished this manuscript, which ultimately became Torpedo Junction, I was ignorant enough of the publishing industry to just mail it off cold to the Naval Institute Press in Annapolis, Maryland. And it went right into their slush fund, or their slush pile, and they turned it around and sent it right back. And said, no, it's not anything we're interested in. And so I was stupid enough that I turned it around and sent it back to them, this time saying, would you please take another look? I think you're wrong. And they took another look, and next thing I know, I had a contract for Torpedo Junction, which is still in print since 1989. So that was the very first book that I had. And but then I got really, really busy, and it did very, very well. It was a bestseller on military history list, and nothing like Hunt for Red October, but for what it was, it did very, very well. But
I've heard of Torpedo Junction. I knew of it. It's a good. I've never read it. Excuse me, but yeah, it's very well known. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. A lot of people can't quite put that together, but the guy who wrote Rocket Boys and all of his other books also wrote Torpedo Junction. But it's like, yeah, same guy. Sorry, but but then I was really, really busy with NASA. Then I had been assigned to Japan to go over there and train the first Japanese astronauts. So I was spending months and months and months over in Japan doing that. And that really took up my time right up through 1992 when it flew. And then I was assigned to the International Space Station as their first training manager, and ended up going over to Russia a lot and all over the place, helping to get that off, literally off the ground.
Off the ground,
and so I didn't have time to write, though I kept writing for as a freelance writer for magazines. And one of the magazines was Smithsonian Air and Space Magazine. They really liked my stuff, and I would write about, some arcane NASA stuff like the neutral buoyancy simulator and that kind of thing. So one night it was around Christmas time, 1995. I got a call from Pat Trenner, who was the editor at that time of Smithsonian Air and Space, and she said, Homer, we're kind of desperate. I need 2,000 words as a filler in the next issue of our magazine, and you've got the reputation around here of being a fast writer. She didn't say good writer. She said fast writer. Could you give me 2,000 words on something that I think that our readers would like, and what are you working on? I wasn't working on anything at the time, but I looked across on my desk, and there sat I'd been using it as a paperweight. This perfectly crafted steel De La Belle rocket nozzle, the only artifact I had left from my days of building rockets back in West Virginia as a kid. And so, and actually that rocket nozzle and the science fair medal, I'd almost forgotten about that time. Really had so many other things that happened in my life
Sure.
at that point. But when my dad passed away, he passed away in '89. He'd lived long enough to read Torpedo Junction, by the way, which he called well written, which I took as high praise from Homer Hickam Sr. And so he had right before he passed away told my mom, we need to send the boys back all the stuff that we've collected from their boyhood years, like their Lionel train, that kind of thing. So the only box that they sent that had his handwriting on was a shoebox and was tied up with twine. It's a miracle that it made it here. Had in it that science fair medal that I'd won back there in 1960, and that rocket nozzle. And so my dad had somehow, over all these years, kept those things without me having any idea about it. And because he had saved it, I looked across my desk, and there was that rocket nozzle. And something just clicked in my head, a really dumb, stupid thing to click there, because who would care? I said, Pat, I could write you 2,000 words on when I was a boy growing up in West Virginia, and we built rockets. And she was, I have to tell you, Pat was completely, totally, utterly underwhelmed with this idea. So naturally, being a West Virginian, I did it anyway. And, and she loved it. The whole staff loved it, and they wanted pictures, anything that I had. And so when that came out, it came out a couple of months later, my phone almost melted down from just people calling out of the blue, telling me how much they love this story, including some Hollywood producers, including some New York editors. And they're all saying, are you going to write a memoir? Because memoirs were hot at that time. Angelus Ashes had just come out. It was a whole new genre. And they're saying, this sounds like this would be a great memoir. Are you going to write a memoir about this? And I said, well, I am now. And so that started it. I had one major false start, really. I had decided, I looked at it and thought, how can I tell this story, And I thought, well, the thing to do is I'll combine it with my present NASA career. I'll write a little bit about what a great, big, important stuffed shirt guy I am at NASA and some of my things, and then I'll contrast that with these poor kids these poor, dumb, ignorant kids trying to build rockets. So I did that, and I was like a couple of hundred pages in it when I had to confess to myself, this is not working. I don't even like it. I'm bored reading it. I don't want to read it. Mm-hmm. So I talked to a classmate, Emily Sue Buckberry, and she was a professor at the University of Ohio, and she said, Sonny, you need to let that boy tell the story. I always loved him. And she knew I wasn't that boy anymore. Right. So I knew that she was right. I didn't want to do it, but I knew I was going to have to crawl up inside of the head of that boy, Sonny Hickam, in the late 1950s, and let him tell the story. And I like to say I got $1 million worth of psychotherapy writing that, but I didn't even know I needed. That's been true of every memoir since. So,
sure. So it was actually started as Rocket Boys. Now, how did it get the name October Sky? Was that a Hollywood decision?
A Hollywood thing. So what happened was that it was made as Rocket Boys, and of course, any author that gets a book made into a movie, which is a miracle, really. Mm. The odds of that happening is, just so astronomical you can't even measure it. That you want the book and the movie to have the same title. Unfortunately, there was a really bad movie called Rocket Man, not the Elton John bio, but this was in 1998.
Yeah, was the one where he had the jetpack on?
Yeah, it was really stupid. Whatever it was, I don't know. It was an awful movie. Anyway, the producers decided or feared that Rocket Boys would be mistook as that stupid movie. So, And they also were afraid, I think, that the title would mean that it would be just primarily a movie for boys.
Right.
And so ultimately, I mean, I was against it. I really was against it. It was like, I want it to be called Rocket Boys. Rocket Boys is a great title. Rocket Boys is what it's about. Rocket Boys, Rocket Boys. No, we're going to change it. So they came up with all kinds of stupid titles. But Joe Johnston, who was the director, had...
I love how frank you are. You're like, it was stupid.
Yeah, well, they were stupid, and I'm capable of being stupid too. So we were basically being stupid at the same time.
Right.
About this. You're trying to get into the heads of your average theater goers. And what do they want? Nobody really knows. Even though they have test audiences, you can believe them or not believe them. Most of the test audiences were out in the rich part of California.
Yeah.
The wealthy part, it's like, eh. But anyway, but Joe Johnston had a computer which had a piece of anagram software, which you take the letters of one word, move them around, they spell out something else. He put in Rocket Boys because he was so exhausted trying to figure out the title just to see what would come out. Out popped the only anagram of Rocket Boys, October Sky.
Would you look at that? I never realized that.
That's right. Move the letters around. There you go. And Rocket Boys, October Sky is actually the same title. Sputnik was launched in October, and
that is so cool.
And we looked up in the sky, right?
Yeah.
So Chuck Gordon, who was the producer, and Joe Johnston called me. They were so excited. It's like, oh, Homer, you're going to love this. We have the perfect title for your movie. It's an anagram of Rocket Boys. It's, wait for it, October Sky. And I said, I hate that title. I hate everything about that title. I don't even know what it means. I'll never support a movie called October Sky. And they responded, great, we knew you'd love it, and hung up, which is exactly the way they paid attention to almost everything I said about that movie.
Well, as far as the content is concerned, outside of the name, they pretty much stayed true to your writing and your story.
It is Rocket Boys. Every word in it is exactly the same as Rocket Boys. They just changed the title. And honestly, it is a good title. And if I had a time machine, I might go back and call the book October Skies. Essentially, with my time machine, I know they're about to make a movie called that. So yeah.
Did you get to go to the set and work on set and everything while they were filming?
Yeah, by the way, I have a new memoir called Don't Blow Yourself Up, which you should buy just for the title alone, right?
That's a fantastic title.
That includes all my time in Vietnam, and also when I was at Virginia Tech, I built the cannon, the skipper. Mm-hmm. So when they score a touchdown, every so often.
Every once in 2 games or so.
Hey, watch it. So anyway, I'm a Hokie. So, okay. It's not easy being a Hokie. If it was, everybody'd be one. But anyway, I built that big cannon that they fire every time they score a touchdown at Virginia Tech. So that's in that book. But also including how I wrote Rocket Boys and then how the movie was made. And so, yes, I was on set more than half the time. They filmed it up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, close to it, and which is only maybe 2.5, 3 hours from my home here in Huntsville. They hired me as a consultant, and they hire almost all writers that they make books into movies. They usually hire the writer as a consultant, which is more or less a fee to stay away. And so, however, I was close enough, and Chuck Gordon and Joe Johnston were gracious enough that they let me and my wife Linda be on set a lot. And so I was there, and I was able to consult with them. I like to hang out with the guys we were 2 sets of guys that I like to hang out with on set. One were the Teamsters, who drove all the cars and the trucks, of course, bringing in all that equipment, everything. And they kept bringing me jars and jars of moonshine. I don't know why. It's like I was afraid to drink it, but I always took it.
It's going to make you go blind. Yeah,
exactly. No idea where this came from. And then also there was the special effects guy was run by a fellow by the name of Joey Giatano. Joey D, as we called him, and they were building those rockets. So I hung out in their machine shop a little bit. I was just amazed how they were able to make these rockets do. I mean, almost every rocket that you see in the movie is not on a wire or anything. It's actually doing these acrobatics.
Oh, wow.
And it was just amazing to me what they were doing. But so I hung out with them quite a lot. And the only time that I was told that my appearance was not really required on set, as a matter of fact, you could say that I was kind of kicked off set, was when Laura Dern, who played Miss Riley, kept asking me to her trailer to talk about her part. And so I was happy, who wouldn't? I'm a red-blooded American boy. And
Sure.
So I hung out with Laura Dern as much as I could. And she did want to talk to her because she felt her part was not big enough. And I agreed with her. And I thought it was weakly written. I thought that Elsie Hickam, my mom, was terribly written. It was way too, this was a strong-willed woman. It doesn't come out necessarily in the movie. But so this is Hollywood. Hollywood, they claim to have a lot of different approaches to life and the way they think. But in fact is, a lot of times, especially during that era, the women were written very, very as weak. And so,
unfortunately.
Unfortunately. And so the Miss Riley character was weak and the mom character was weak. But Laura Dern had the stature where Natalie Canterday didn't, who played Elsie. She had the stature to be able to talk to the producers and director about her part. And so the producers came to me and said, "You know what, Homer? Every time we talk to Laura Dern, she says, 'Well, Homer said.' And so why don't you not hang around here for a couple of weeks?" Yeah. So, but I have to say, and so they did shoot a number of scenes with Laura Dern playing Miss Riley that they didn't want to shoot. But I have to tell you, all those scenes, those extra scenes that she insisted on, ended up in the movie.
Well, there you go.
They recognized they would have missed out on this. They recognized after when we got into the editing phase how important this character was and how strong this character needed to be. They would have not had that on film if Laura Dern had not forced the issue. So,
knowing what I know about you now, and of course, Rocket Boys and October Sky is famously what you're really known for. I, as a fan, would almost want to see a Homer Hickam Vietnam docu-series or documentary about your experience in Vietnam, because that's intriguing to me as well. Have you thought about maybe doing something there or piecing something together with your service?
Yeah, I'd be willing to do something. Right now, I have to tell you, Nick, that we're working on, very seriously working on a movie based upon, it's not a sequel to Rocket Boys. I call it an equal because it takes place during the same time. It was the next book after Rocket Boys called The Colwood Way. And The Colwood Way was a Christmas story. It does take place during the Christmas time frame of 1959. It tells a different story, but it's got the same characters. It's got the Rocket Boys, got my parents, but it really gets down into the life of this coal town more than the book originally did. I had made that part of the book. But it went down a different path so much that I pulled it out. And then after the book was such a big success in the movie and so on, I was asked to write a sequel, and I said, "Let me write an equal. I want to write an equal because I've got one." It was The Colwood Way. So right now, I'm working with a number of producers. I'm working with Kevin Sizemore, who's So Kevin is an actor from Princeton, West Virginia, and was in Mine 9. And so Kevin is he asked me if I would write a screenplay, and I said, well, Kevin, as a matter of fact, I'm about halfway through. I was just working over on the side a little bit on the Coldwood Way, thinking about maybe it would be a good Christmas movie someday or something. And so he urged me to finish the screenplay. I did. He loved it. And so we've lined up a number of producers for it. We'll very soon have what they call a table read.
Yeah.
Where we bring in real actors who will read all the parts. So there's a possibility that that might end up being a film. And yeah, I could see some dramatic possibilities of my time in Vietnam. So we shall see.
That's a good segue. You were talking about McDowell County and your time there, and it's very well documented, the economic downturn of McDowell County and Welch and so forth. Do you get to come back this way very often, and do you still have family in McDowell County?
I don't have a family anymore. Of course, when I grew up there, I had my dad's brother, Uncle Clarence, worked for my dad, and then my brother, my mother had 4 brothers who all worked in McDowell County. Uncle Joe, Uncle Charlie, Uncle Ken, and Uncle Emmett, and so. So, I mean, there was a lot of relatives right there in McDowell County.
Yeah.
But when the mines started to close down and they got older, they all moved away. And all my friends moved away, too. There's nobody left in McDowell County.
That seems to be the reoccurring story that we hear in the news. You know, when the mines started to shut down, people just dispersed. And unfortunately, it seems like a lot of those that are left there, the poverty level is so high. And thankfully, the community and the state are starting to pour things back in there, trying to find other economic advantages for folks who live in that area that it's not just supported by coal anymore. I remember the first time I drove through Welch, I couldn't believe I was, and this is no disrespect to the people of Welch. I mean, they're phenomenal people, but I couldn't believe I was still in the United States, let alone West Virginia. It was like, how did we get to this point, here? And why isn't more being done to help these people?
Yeah, it frankly breaks my heart, and to go back into McDowell County now. And I hadn't been back for many years until really the book and the movie came out. And so we're looking at a pretty wide gap there. So I guess I was there in the early 1970s when my parents were still there. And then I got really busy. Like I said, I lived in Germany for a while and in Japan and, all the other stuff that I was doing. There just wasn't anything to bring me back to the county. And I obviously had very fond memories of it, as did I remained close to most of my classmates one way or the other, send Christmas cards and all that. But they had all dispersed everywhere. And so I was not really prepared to see it the way it was when I went back in around the year 2000. So, I mean, Coldwood, the mine had long since closed. The school had been burned down. Most of the houses had been abandoned. Trees were growing up through these houses where I remembered very fondly the people who had lived in these houses, and they were just abandoned with the furniture still in it and everything.
Oh,
and
wow.
It looked like a war zone. Is what it looked like. And so yes, it broke my heart. But what to do about it? There wasn't really anything I could do about it. So
the legislature in West Virginia, being here, I see and I hear a lot of this in the news. A lot of things they're talking about is bringing tech industries into West Virginia. You think about it, we have 64, 79, 77, all these major thoroughfares through the East Coast. I think West Virginia is positioned well for the tech industry, as well as commercially getting it out there with highways and trucking and so forth. So we'll see. Maybe it'll help.
I agree. I mean, West Virginia, in the first place, we're sitting on enough natural gas to feed the world's energy requirements for next century. Just by ourselves. Eventually, we're going to want to get that. And But besides that, so Kevin and I we are almost insistent that if we do get this movie made, which by the way we're calling December Sky, isn't that original?
Okay.
I don't know what that's an anagram of, but you never know. I'll
find that software he used and see if I can't figure it out.
I'd hate to see what came out the other end. But we are insistent, as much as we possibly can be, to see that this film is made in West Virginia.
Oh,
because being in the film industry more than me, I'm a book writer. Hollywood is kind of interesting to me. It's fun, but I don't. If I'd really wanted to make a whole lot of more movies after October Sky, I'd have gone out to L.A. and lived out there, or up in New York and lived in New York. But we love our little house here in Huntsville, so I'm happy to be here. But we would like to see the film industry in West Virginia do better. It's already doing pretty well. A number of major movies have been made in there. And but it really is a good location. As long as I can tell you that the reason that they didn't film October Sky in West Virginia was, first, the West Virginia Film Commission didn't really chase after it, and the Tennessee Film Commission did. But also at that time, in order to have a major film like that, you're talking about bringing in literally hundreds, sometimes like 1,000 people if you add them all up.
Right.
They have to be. They're like a small community, and they come in and they have to be fed and watered, right? And so, where could they be where they would have some amenities? They have to need hotels around and all that kind of thing. That type of thing is not required anymore. But with the new cameras that they have, software and so on, you can have a major motion picture without all that equipment and all those people. So that's good for West Virginia. That means that although the geography may be limited, the roads may be quaint, I get all that. Nonetheless, you can get in there with the equipment that you need and make a pretty good movie. Plus, the labor is going to be good. People in West Virginia are the hardest working people in the world. They're very intelligent. Sure. They're capable of doing anything. If you ever stuck alongside the road, just pray to God it'll be a West Virginian that comes along.
Yeah, that's true.
They'll figure it out.
Well, I can tell you, I moved here in 2006, so I grew up in the Cincinnati area. Are you familiar maybe with the amusement park called Kings Island?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've not been there.
So I grew up literally right there beside it. And in the time that I've been in West Virginia, I've seen this state grow by leaps and bounds in terms of infrastructure. So when you're talking about all these people and this making a movie would take an entire community, I have no doubt that there are many places in West Virginia that could sufficiently provide for and house a community like that to make a movie. Maybe not back in the 90s, like you were talking, but now I think getting around the roads and restaurants and hotels and things of that nature, I think it would be very easy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee was able to sell it. For one thing, at that time, you had to fly out dailies. They flew the film out to California to be processed and then come back. And so they needed a major airport, and there really wasn't anything that connected. They did have something at Knoxville that could do that. So obviously, again, the technology has changed. You don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to fly back and forth between Hollywood to get it processed. It's processed right there in your camera. It's going to come right out. So this is good for states like West Virginia that would like to develop their film industry. And you can say, well, that's kind of frivolous, Homer, film industry, movies. But the fact is that when you film something like that, people see the state and they go, oh my God, that's gorgeous. That's a beautiful place. Look at that. It
is.
I want to go there, and maybe I want to retire there, and maybe I want So it's good to get this image out there. And the Coldwood Way, December Sky would be a very positive image of the life in the coal town of southern West Virginia.
Do you know when you're going to start shooting, or do you have like a goal when you'd start to begin production?
Well, we're going to do a table read this week, where we'll get actors to sit around the table and read my screenplay, and I'll cringe as they do that. So because I'll go, it's a thing. When I listen to an audiobook, I've written 19 books now. So when I listen to, and all of them have been made into audio tapes. So that's wonderful and great. And so usually about a year after it all comes out, I'll listen to the audio and I go, oh my God, Hickam, you do go on. Why didn't you cut that out of there? But and so I'm sure that's going to be the same way with the table read. But so the table read is a number of producers are going to be listening in. And again, it's like the new technology is just amazing. So we'll be out on Zoom or one of those platforms. So anybody anywhere that we allow can listen in on this table read, where we have real live, honest to gosh actors reading these different parts. It's going to be very, very helpful. I've done a number of table reads before because I was one of the writers on Rocket Boys the musical. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of know how it all goes. So you get an idea how long something is going to be and whether it's too long, whether something sounds stilted, whether something just, it needs a beat or has too many beats or whatever it is. So it's very valuable. But at the same time, and so the producers that are listening in, they can discern most likely whether this is a film that they would like to do or be involved with. And, ultimately it's about money.
Sure.
You still got to raise some millions of dollars to make a movie. I don't care where you do it or how you do it. If it's going to be, have some value to it. Yeah. And so, you want to have every dollar that you spend up there on the screen, and that takes a lot of work. And
it does.
So it's all about whether or not money can be raised to do this, and so we'll see who comes on board.
I cannot wait. Now, have you made this announcement anywhere else? Does anyone else know that you're going to do this in West Virginia, or is this the first time you're talking about it?
You have an exclusive. Yeah.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Homer Hickam, December Sky, filmed in West Virginia. He's going to make it happen. I love it.
I will try my best, and so will Kevin, to do it.
Sure.
I mean, we're practical enough. If somebody comes along and says, by golly, I'm going to give you $100 million, Homer, if you'll make this movie in British Columbia. And I'll go, you know what? British Columbia looks just like Southern Mississippi. What a concept.
Looks like Beckley. Looks just like
it
Beckley.
It does. It's just amazing. I'm just stunned how similar they are.
Well, Homer, I have had you for almost an hour now, and you are amazing, sir. Your life is amazing, and I didn't know about your service to our country, and that just makes it even more astonishing to me. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart being here today. And I just remember when you make that movie, remember old Nick Scott, reach out to Burke. I'd love to have you back on to talk about the movie if you'd have me.
Absolutely. Burke is totally involved with this. As a matter of fact, he's going to be one of the actors.
Really?
Yes. We have a narration. It's called Old Sonny. Old Sonny, gives a little background. He's going to be
You should do Old Sonny.
I'm truly too much Old Sonny. You know what? A man needs to know his limitations, and one of them is probably that. So I think we need kind of a
not you, Sonny.
Yeah, not me, Sonny. I mean, I have such a youthful voice. Nobody's going to believe it. I'm old, right?
If you wouldn't have told me, if you wouldn't have, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said, and Burke, yeah, he can be old. So there you go.
If you wouldn't have told me you were getting ready to turn 80, and this is, I'm giving you a compliment, but it's God's honest truth. I would have had no idea. You look great for almost 80, sir. So.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that.
Well,
I really do.
I want to leave you with this. Just remember, when you hear the name Nick Scott, there's a girl named Kelly who back in the day, you made her day. And you really touched her and left such a wonderful memory. And she keeps so much so that she keeps this in a climate-controlled safe. So
I love it. Rocket Boy Kelly. I love it.
Rocket Boy Kelly. I'll show her that. Homer, this was an honor and a pleasure. You are welcome to come back on anytime when the movie is getting produced or come out, or if you just want to come on and shoot the crap with me, the door is always open, sir. And I thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Nick. It was a great interview. I loved it. So thank you.